Thank you, Cantor Lisa, for that gorgeous melody. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this morning. I just wanted to, I'm really excited to introduce our guest speaker, and I wanted to share that there are several people who are coming from Kol Tzedek Synagogue in Philadelphia, and Rabbi Ari Lev Fornari, Rabbi Michelle Greenfield from that synagogue are here. My former synagogue, for I think everyone who knows, are here because they are excited to hear Rabbi Elliot, and just the ability to do that on Zoom and merge these two worlds is pretty amazing for me. A kind of crazy, amazing experience for me to see this bridge together. And we are so excited. I'm seeing some people I haven't seen. Please put yourself in the chat so I know who's here. I'm so excited to see you. For those who I know from Kol Tzedek from years ago already. So one of the, obviously none of us are happy to be in this situation in which we're in terms of the pandemic. But one of the silver linings is, of course, the way that technology can connect us across geography and in new and important ways. I'm like about to cry because I'm seeing all these people from from Kol Tzedek. Okay. But so there's this piece of it. And then there's also the fact that Rabbi Elliot Kukla would not be able to be with us if we were under normal circumstances because of the time difference and locations. We're able to bring him to us and us to him. And we are so thrilled. He's in the Bay Area. It's 3 hours earlier. Thank you for being with us early in the morning. Rabbi Elliot Kukla is a rabbi at the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center, where he provides spiritual care to those who are ill, dying, or bereaved. His articles appear widely in the New York Times, The Forward, National Geographic, and Tikkun. Elliot is a disability activist and an artist. In 2006, he was the first openly transgender rabbi to be ordained by a mainstream movement at the Reform Movement's Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles. So thank you for that and for pioneering the way for so many. He's a visual artist with the Disability Justice Project, Sins Invalid, and he is currently writing a book on being chronically ill in a planetary crisis. He lives in Oakland with his partner and their child, and many animals. He's going to talk today about Cripping, Revelation, the Torah of illness, disability, and pandemic. And now we're going to spotlight him and hear from Rabbi Kukla.
Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom. It's so good to be with you all. And it's so good to be with both congregations. Like, what a gift. As Rabbi Lauren was saying, it's an incredible thing to be with both SAJ and my friends at Kol Tzedek and Rabbi Ari Lev and Rabbi Michelle. It's such a incredible, I feel like it's a sort of like Hogwarts part of this, that we can be in two congregations at the same time. So it's great to get a little bit of magic out of the situation. So I also want to name that we are gathering today on Shabbat morning in the midst of a powerful uprising for racial justice, and dedicate this teaching this morning to those who are out in the street protesting right now in this incredible upswelling in this country for human rights. As Rabbi Lauren just mentioned, I'm a rabbi who is both personally chronically ill, and I work with people who are also severely ill and coming towards the end of life, or seriously ill, or in grief. And a lot of the experiences that I've been having communally in this pandemic have felt very familiar to me, both from my personal experiences with chronic illness and from my experiences with clients coming to personal experiences of illness, or coming towards the end of life, or coming into a new disability, or coming to experience loss. And I've been really struck by this experience of how in the blink of an eye, everything can be different. how our whole world can change, either the personal geography of our world or the community. Are you having trouble hearing me? Great. I wasn't sure from your face.
It's going in and out. You need to sit closer.
He's doing the best he can. It's all good.
Okay, good. I'll scooch up a little bit there. So I've been really struck by how in the blink of an eye, our entire life, either personally. I just lost.
Actually, now it is going in and out.
Is this better? Am I better here?
Some kind of clicking noise, I think.
Okay. Here, let me try to get you. I'm just losing you here. Okay, so there we go. I'm adjusting my computer here. So I've been really struck by this experience of how in a blink of an eye, everything can change. For me, in terms of my experience with illness, I basically just got sick one day and never got better. But I've been with a lot of clients who have had the experience of picking up a phone and getting a diagnosis, and life has changed forever. Or picking up the phone and getting news of an accident, and life has changed forever. And likewise, my experience of pandemic, as was many of our experiences of pandemic, was that I left my office on a Friday with a dirty coffee mug on my desk and never went back. And I picked my kid up from daycare on a Thursday, and it's been a few months and I haven't brought him back. And the entire shape of my day-to-day life has changed. The entire look of my neighborhood in Oakland has changed. Everything has changed in the blink of an eye. And it has really reminded me of experiences of personal illness, except this time there are billions of people along with me. And for many of those billions of people are experiencing it for the first time. And for those of us who come from the world of illness and disability, it has this strange tenor because it's what is usually our private life. And this experience is being written communally. I was really struck by a Facebook post by a deaf artist named Joseph Grigley, who wrote a letter to his students. And originally it was just a letter to his students about canceling their class on performance art. And in it, he talked about this idea that the world had been cripped. And that's where I got the title for this drash today of Cripping Revelation. And he talked about cripping the world. So in the world of disability and disability theory, the language of cripping something means becoming disabled or looking at something through a disabled lens. And what he talked about was how in pandemic, the entire world was being cripped. And a lot of sick and disabled people are saying, welcome to my world. Society as a whole in this country is experiencing many of the things that sick and disabled people have been familiar with for a long time, including social isolation, suddenly communicating largely over technology. Hanging out over Zoom is not new for me. I've experienced a lot of my social life over Zoom for a very long time during long periods of being housebound, and so have most sick and disabled people. A sudden awareness of mortality that tends to go along with either a new disability or a deepening disability or periods of illness. New limitations on mobility of where you can go and how you can go, and frustration with institutional limits, discovering that hospitals have limits and that the healthcare system isn't there to meet all of our needs, a sudden disruption of plans, unsettling uncertainty, and an inability to plan for the future. Just like in individual illness, when you suddenly discover, maybe I can get out of bed today and maybe I can't, and it's incredibly difficult to make plans. As a country, we're facing this incredible uncertainty of just having no idea how and when this pandemic might end, and the disturbing quality of not being able to really plan for the high holidays, for example, which is unsettling for most of us. Most of us don't like to live in the land of uncertainty. And as in the experience of individual illness, in pandemic, we've all seen how the experience of privilege really impacts the experience of illness in very real and concrete ways. Privilege impacts how long you live and how much pain you have and how your symptoms play out. So for me, I've long been aware that as a white rabbi, I have access to tools for healing and for rest that other people in my disabled community, particularly poor people, people of color in my community, simply don't have, that changes in very concrete ways how long I will live with my diagnosis and how much pain and discomfort I feel on a day-to-day basis. And we've seen this writ very large on a communal level in pandemic in terms of who's dying and in what numbers and how people are experiencing their symptoms in terms of health disparities that go very deep in this country and have been very stark. But what I also want to say is, despite the fact that I have this privilege and access to healing tools, when I've been sick, I've also really struggled to ask for what I need. And I'm not sure if this is an experience that other people who've lived with chronic illness, who have access to healing tools, have had. I'd be curious if some of you speak about that in the chat. One of the wonderful tools of being able to do things like this over chat is over Zoom is access to the chat box. But one of the experiences that I have had, and which many people I know have had, is still struggling to ask for what I need, despite having access to tools and care that other people don't have. Like many people, I was raised to see my worth as being based on being productive at work and showing up for family and friends and striving for a kind of independence. And as a chronically ill person, I've really had to learn how to be cared for. And during my first really bad lupus flare, my partner taught me, I kept trying to do things that would make me sicker at a time when I really needed to be living in bed. And my partner said to me that I had been raised to see my survival and my accountability, like most people in our culture, as doing things to be productive. And now to survive and to be accountable to her and to others that love me, I would need to learn how to not do things. And that is a lesson that has been incredibly hard to learn, and one that really stayed with me. And at the same time as trying to learn that from my partner, I also connected with the thinking of disability justice and the thinking of women, queer women of color who are the leaders of disability justice, like Stacey Milburn, Patricia Byrne, and Alice Wong. And from them, I learned some of the principles of disability justice, like the importance of rest and the concept of interdependence. That it is not necessarily a goal to be independent, but that all of us need care, and that we are born needing care and we die needing care. And in that period, it also became clear to me how much so-called able people depend on others' labor. Everyone travels on roads they didn't build and eats food they didn't grow or pick. And this is a lesson that has become so much clearer in pandemic. Pandemic reveals how interdependent we are on other people's labor. I've been thinking about how as our infrastructure becomes less sturdy, it also becomes less invisible. It's become how clear so many of us benefit from essential services like selling, delivering, growing, and picking our food that's usually done by poor Black and brown people in this country. As our infrastructure becomes more visible, we have to admit more that we depend on other people. And that's a difficult thing to admit because it breaks the myth of independence, that so much of our identities are based on. And I've been really struck by some of the protesters with signs that say, I need a haircut. Because underneath those signs that say, I need a haircut, is something of an acknowledgement that we need each other, that most of us don't really cut our own hair. But instead of acknowledging, oh, wow, I need a haircut, and my barber is also a person who needs to be safe, who needs to protect their grandmother. In that sign, I need a haircut, the haircut itself becomes kind of a faceless service to demand to maintain the illusion of independence in pandemic, as if we could get a haircut without a barber, as if the barber is not a person with their own needs. And it maintains this idea that we could have independence without other people. And I want to share a quote for you from Stacy Milburn, who was a friend in disability justice movement, who died just a couple weeks ago on May 19th on her 33rd birthday, an incredibly wise comrade. And she writes, "We live and love interdependently. We know no one person is an island. We need one another to live. No one does their own dental work or cuts their own hair. We all need support. Hierarchy of what support is okay to need and what isn't is just ableism." And that was before pandemic. So I want to turn now to the idea of cripping revelation, make this more Jewish. So what does this have to do with revelation? So I've been thinking about this idea of cripping the world in the context of Judaism. And I was thinking about it also in the context of Shavuot, which we just marked. And there's this really interesting text about revelation, which is that at Mount Sinai, when the Torah was offered to us, it was actually held over our heads. So I'll read you the text. It's from the Babylonian Talmud, Shabbat 88a. "And they took their places at the foot or the underside of the mountain." And that's from Exodus. "Rav Avdimi, the son of Hama, the son of Chasa, said, 'This teaches that the Holy One, blessed is the One, lowered the detached mountain over them like a vat and said to them, if you accept the Torah, fine, but if not, there will be your grave.' In other words, if you accept the Torah, great. If not, you're going to get squashed under the mountain." So this is a really problematic text because we like to think that the Torah was accepted willingly and with love. In fact, it's a whole basis of rabbinic law that Jewish laws accept willingly. That's the whole point of a bar and bat mitzvah, is that we accept Jewish law willingly. And even more so, earlier in the book of Exodus, when the ancient Israelites are offered the Torah, even before they know what it says, they say na'aseh v'nishma, which means we'll do and we will hear. We're going to accept this and do what it means even before we understand it. So how do we reconcile this text where they have to be forced to accept the Torah with both the idea that we need to accept things willingly and that the Jews did accept the Torah willingly? So there's lots of different solutions to this, but the one that really spoke to me in this context is that in the Midrash, exactly, I just saw in the comments, Ori says that's not informed consent. This is a problem. Exactly, the rabbis had the same problem. The rabbis like to have informed consent too, the ancient rabbis in the Talmud. How am I doing for time, Lauren? I feel like I'm running over a bit.
You're great. Keep going.
Okay, thanks. So in the Midrash, the answer given to this confusing problem is, okay, so when the Jews say na'aseh v'nishma, we'll take it, even without, we're good. That's the written Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. What is it hanging over our head that we have to be forced to take? That's the oral Torah. So what's the oral Torah? The oral Torah is the entire body of Jewish commentary. that begins in the 1st century in another moment similar to this one of infrastructure collapse. After the temple has been destroyed and the Jews are trying to figure out how to have a religion without a building. Another moment of crisis like ours, and continues through the Talmud, continues through the Spanish Inquisition, through the Middle Ages, continues all the way through 19th century codes, and continues into this conversation. The oral Torah is the entire body of Jewish commentary that is still going and is a continuous dialogue. The oral Torah, in other words, is us. The oral Torah is not God laying down a series of laws that are clear and easy to follow, like the written Torah. The oral Torah is us in dialogue with each other without clear answers. In the oral Torah, God's name is rarely used. If you look in the Talmud, you rarely see God's name except in euphemism, and answers are rarely given. Usually there's debate, there's dialogue, there's multiple answers, there's minority opinions. There's rarely a clear answer. It's commentary, it's dialogue, it's conversation. And in fact, in the world of Jewish commentary, in the world of the oral Torah, things are so murky and complicated that we can't learn it on our own. We have to learn it in Havruta, in further dialogue. We need each other to learn it as well as to create it. Everything about the world of oral Torah is also a world of interconnection. So I kind of wanted to share this idea that the world of illness and disability and pandemic, the myth that we get to, that is broken, that we get to through illness, is that we can be independent. And that's also the world of oral Torah, is this world of interconnection. And that's what we have to be forced to accept. We're fine with just accepting the world of written Torah, where there's a clear answer and there's certainty, but accepting each other, accepting the uncertainty, and accepting our questions, accepting our debate, that we have to be forced to create. That we have to be forced to accept from each other. And most of us don't accept that reality willingly. Most of us don't accept the fact that we are deeply interconnected with each other, except from the experience of illness, the experience of coming towards death, the experience of grief, the experience of pandemic. Usually there's some kind of mountain over our head that makes us aware of how interconnected we are. And that, I think, is one of those answers for that informed consent piece. Maybe it's not about informed consent, it's that it just is. We don't see that mountain unless we have to. And another thing that generally makes us see that mountain, makes us see the interconnection that we don't want to see, is trauma, is oppression, and suffering. And I want to suggest that another thing that will make us more readily see the mountain are experiences of deep oppression, like racism. And that it's not an accident that the leaders of disability justice are disabled queer women of color. That people who are closer to the problem are generally closer to the solution. So that the queer disabled women of color who came up with a lot of the wisdom about interconnection of disability justice have vision about this interconnection because of being closer to some of the problems that come from the myth of independence. So as I come to a close today, I wanted to end with this idea that a lot of us are craving a return to normal right now. I know that I have moments of craving a return to normal. But if we think of that mountain over our head as an awareness of our interconnection, then normal is going back to not seeing the mountain. And that's probably not I'll say that's that's an option that only some of us had to begin with. Normal wasn't a good place for a lot of us to begin with. And normal may not be what to aspire to. And I want to offer this beautiful quote from Roxane Gay. I'm going to put it in the chat box so that we can see it more clearly, everyone. Eventually, enter it. Eventually, doctors will find a coronavirus vaccine, but Black people will continue to wait despite the futility of hope for a cure for racism. We will live with the knowledge that a hashtag is not a vaccine for white supremacy. We live with the knowledge that still no one is coming to save us. The rest of the world yearns to get back to normal. For Black people, normal is the very thing from which we yearn to be free. So this is Roxane Gay in the New York Times just a couple days ago, and it really struck me. I want to leave us with this idea that maybe what we are aiming for is something bigger than normal. And we don't know what that is yet. And that is a frightening place to be, and also a place filled with potential. Shabbat Shalom. And I'm so glad to be with you all today.
Rabbi Kukla, Rabbi Elliot, thank you so much. It was so profound, so much beautiful Torah, and I'm just so grateful for it. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for helping us create this amazing and Harry Potter, like you said, combination of communities together today. Such beautiful wisdom. I've never connected that idea of interdependence with oral Torah, and it's just a stunning revelation. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the Aleinu and our final closing prayers, I wanted to share this prayer for protest, for all those who are protesting, all those who are on the street. I know that many people in our congregation have health issues or are not of an age where they feel safe to be out on the streets and want to be supportive and find their way. So I wanted to, and not everyone is able to do that. So we wanted to share this prayer for them and for all of us. The prayer that I wrote this morning. Adonai Tzidkenu, God of justice, we call to you to protect all those protesting and marching for Black lives. Bless all of those of all ages, races, and backgrounds who have put their risk for safety, whether through COVID exposure or police brutality, to protest evil and wrongdoing. Bless them, keep them safe, guard them under the wings of the Shekhinah and under the sukkah of your fragile peace. Guard their going out and their coming in now and forever. May the work of their hands be established. May it be established. May their brave witness and their cries for justice be heard throughout all lands until no elected official and no citizen can look away. May we each find a way to do our part to make this world one in which every person and every system acknowledges the innate dignity and beauty of every person in every community. May God protect these protesters, all of us, all the protesters, and let us speak and act until we can walk together into a new day of justice, equality, and love. And let us say, Amen.